members' comments? Anybody? Kathy?
I do have comments. First of all, I want to thank the other 4 members of the planning board. I know how much time you spend preparing in advance of our meetings. I know you take our job very seriously and weigh decisions based on the authority granted us by the Sarasota City Plan and the Zoning Code, not on politics. I'm honored to sit at this table with you. I don't quite know what to say about what happened at the City Commission meeting last week. The Planning Board was led to believe that we had found common ground regarding avenues to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the code enforcement and suggestions that we could make to the City Commission. At the City Commission meeting, the Planning Board was audaciously ambushed. I know that in the many years I've been involved in government and governance at the local, state, and national levels, I have never before been ambushed. I also know that had I been able to remain at the meeting to the end of our agenda item, I would have offered to tender my resignation. After further consideration, that's not the path I'm going to take. I have lost trust in and respect for those who orchestrated and perpetrated the ambush, and for the city commissioners who issued uninformed and unwarranted criticisms of our board. As we go forward, I will continue to work with them, but I'll keep my eyes wide open. I will continue to prepare and participate to the best of my ability, and continue to make decisions based on the authority granted the planning board by the city plan and the zoning code, never based on politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there anybody else who has a comment?
Those of you who read my letter probably have a sense of just how delighted I was at the end of that meeting. One thing I actually regret is that I apologized when I shouldn't have. I actually looked at the memo I wrote, and I want to read it into the record now because having been typified as attacking staff or declaring them corrupt, and then having that paraded out as a cause to basically undermine this entire process, I find profoundly offensive. So I'm going to read this. So the notion of the planning board currently being directly involved in monitoring code enforcement was crushed and ground into the dirt by council using zoning ordinance list of planning board's duties, responsibilities, and power clearly outlined. I agree with that. However, the reality still remains that on several occasions, public testimony has exposed concerns that the proffer's conditioning approval will not be fully or properly enforced, and whether construction safety measures will be observed and enforced. If the planning board approves a project over such objections, it follows that the planning board does indeed have a stake in monitoring both categories of code enforcement. This is a request to the city commission to empower a process to answer those concerns and thereby allow the planning board to confidently assert in the affirmative when such questions arise. This was written in February, and this is what caused all the kerfuffle. Now, the rest of it, it would be useful to ask these questions of ourselves. What is the level of code enforcement that the community wants, and where are those lines between maintaining community standards and harassment? 2, is staffing adequate in these categories to both maintain community standards and, more importantly, community safety? 3, who and where are the chronic offenders? 4, are the fines and penalties reasonable, and if so, are they high enough, particularly for chronic offenders? 5, are other fees and assessments high enough to assure the highest efficiency and urgency when it comes to public right-of-ways being closed or compromised? 6, what does it cost the community for unkempt properties? Second, this is where I got angry. What is the role of special magistrate, and where are the lines between fair treatment and laxity detrimental to the community? And the last one is, are there problematic relationships between staff and offenders? That obviously got an amazing response. Arriving at these answers to these questions alone would consume a tremendous amount of time. We recommend an advisory panel, this is me, be empowered to assemble to thoroughly review and answer those questions and others. We further recommend that the panel be comprised of city police, city staff, neighborhood representatives, citizens, and other advisory board representatives, such as nuisance abatement, planning board, and perhaps board of adjustment, and business owners. And most importantly, that the entire process happen over the next 6 months. Now, I thought that maybe I wrote something inflammatory or stupid, but then I read it again this weekend, and I realized this is not any more than an attempt to be thorough and to be typified as accusing staff, who I've done nothing but support ever since I got involved with the city, is more offensive to me than you can probably even begin to understand. And so there's another piece I want to write. I know we're late, but this is important, I think. It seems that much of the controversy and dissatisfaction has come from the thin staffing and failing of the code itself. Vague language, absent standards, and other flaws in the process itself, particularly inadequately addressed compatibility standards, all of which is lawsuit food. Without a clear, strong code that reflects what we as an entire community want, one that includes lessons learned from past mistakes and additional public processes and exercise in divisiveness and futility. Sensible, inclusive, predictable process with standards that preserve the walkability and ground level experience of Sarasota citizens and visitors while enhancing Sarasota's skyline for her admirers. Sounds simple, huh? Between a 5-year-long aborted form-based code process, that massive waste of millions of dollars and thousands of man-hours, and the continuing serious damage to any degree of trust between parties, how can these reasonable goals be achieved? Certainly not by extremists or by divisive foaming masqueraded as leadership discourse. Community is looking to the City Commission and advisory boards for leadership. When members of the City Commission confuse insults and innuendo with leadership, there's no chance that the real thing can take root. Solving any of these problems requires strong, inclusive leadership to bring all the parties together for a common purpose, to find that middle ground, to find that common ground where people share the realization that Sarasota is a multifaceted jewel and walk a smart line between profit, progress, and preservation. Our job is to do the best possible version of a city, and that's where the focus should be. I'm just a philosopher at heart, so I had to add that. So, I'm done.
Patrick.
I will say something. I'm not nearly the author and journalist and writer as many of my peers here who are able to express themselves more fluently, so I have not taken to trying to write a missive. But I will say that my most significant disappointment with the July 1st City Commission meeting was not only the ambush, but the lack of recognition by city staff that questions raised by our citizens, and in an attempt to try and bring those questions together to try and solve problems, the problems that are raised appear to be ignored, and the people raising the questions appear to be attacked. And in my business career, that was a recipe for failure of that business, that if you didn't listen to your customers, if the management wasn't continuously seeking input and then having a problem-solving mechanism as opposed to a problem avoidance, then that would complicate that business's success out there. And I fear for the efficiency of government operations when that's not in place. When there's not a continuous improvement process where the people who are most impacted by the government services, we just got through reading the chapters that say the citizens should have input. And sometimes individual citizens don't understand. They are expressing the pain, like it's like a baby, they're crying, they don't know why. So it's up to the parents, up to somebody to look at those pains that people are crying out with and say, well, it could be here, it could be there, or thinking about it, really taking some personal time and thinking about it and saying, well, I think maybe it might be in this area, A or B, and so here's some questions. And this is what Mr. Morris was doing, is writing down some questions as to how do we uncover the root causes and try and make some continuous improvement. And when that's not happening, and we can't bring those concerns forward, then yeah, why are we here? I mean, we'll go through our functions. I've committed for my tenure, and I'll do all the due diligence. But if a citizen asks me, do I have confidence that the city is operating in a continuous improvement mode and looks for input, my answer would be no. And to show you the exact opposite, I know staff responds individually. I would say, I've told people when I first came to town here, the city administration was open. You could approach people and have those discussions. But simply approaching and having the dialogue is one thing. Actually seeing the changes that focus on the problems that are directly affecting the citizens is how does that go forward and then be able to report back? You know, it's if you're monitoring something, you have to have measurements and then be able to report out all those measurements. So that's, I think, where the frustration was coming. And I'm just looking at it from, hey, here are some simple ways of doing that. And it's not in a vacuum. I have worked for, been paid by governments and dealt with governments at many, many different levels, at all levels from municipal to international. So I know that there's a difference there of how you run a government versus running a business, but dealing with your constituents and your customers is pretty simple in terms of that process. So that's where my concern is, and why I was flabbergasted with the response. So both from the commissioners, or a few of the commissioners, and then how that scene came about, was allowed to come about, I don't understand. So.
Thank you, Patrick. Damien, did you have anything you wanted to say? No, I'm lost.
No, I just wanted to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for all of my fellow board members, and it's been an honor serving on this board with you. And perhaps I have some thick skin because of my years in school, but you know, I looked at some of the comments as constructive criticism. I looked at some of the comments as maybe a little bit more on the criticism side, but I think it's time to put our heads down and focus and kind of concentrate on what's coming up for this board, and hopefully put this behind us.
I also wrote a letter, which a lot of you received. I'm not going to read it. I will, however, give it to Karen to attach to tonight's proceedings so that anyone who wants to read it can get it. I also want to say how proud I am to be on this board with these four people. I've been on a lot of committees and boards, and it's a rare occurrence that a group actually gels the way this one does. I don't mean we vote the same, we don't. Sometimes we do. But I mean that everyone has a particular expertise. Somehow it's worked out that way. And we respect each other. And we all work with the common goal of doing what's right for the city. It's kind of a dream team in my estimation. It doesn't happen often. I think we were taken by surprise on July 1st. I think I can say that with confidence. I don't think any of us are so thin-skinned that we can't take criticism, but we all know that is not what that was. It was so dramatic, it was almost funny if it weren't so unprofessional. It was unworthy of senior staff or any staff. And then, of course, we had the commission itself. Two of the commissioners were particularly egregious. Two of them were particularly delightful. Mr. Brody, of course, he's shared his thoughts with us, so I'll share mine. He was abusive. He's consistently abusive to other city commission members and to people who appear before him, and even to people who meet with him in private. He tried to destroy the credibility of this board, but he was not successful in doing that. Everything we do is on videotape. You can look at the videotape, and that's all you need to do. I think we were a little bit confused by Mr. Litchett's change of story from what he told me in private, then what he told the planning board, and then what he told the city commission. He told us he had a need for staff, for more expertise, and for updates of the codes. He went to the city commission and said he had a need for staff. In fact, I have it, the city commission now has, verbatim minutes, but I'm not gonna read it, it's too late. I hope you then had an opportunity to look at the video of the city commission's July 8th budget hearings, at which Mr. Litchett then told them he had no need for staff, other than one planner. It's no wonder everyone's confused. In that same budget workshop, City Manager Tom Barwin committed to have what he called a full and robust conversation with the chair, I guess that's me, about our perceptions, and with Mr. Litchett to get his perceptions, and he committed to the commission to do that within 30 days. Since we won't be meeting again until September, I'll commit to you to go back over our discussions, including all those things we wrote down in February, including yours and mine and anyone else who wrote things in February. All those suggestions I will take to Mr. Barwin, and I'll also listen to the conversation, because we can't discuss it again, and I'll just take it from the discussions we had in the past. I'll make every attempt to keep you updated, possibly by writing a short report if anything happens, and I believe that can be sent by email to the board if they don't reply. Am I correct, Mr. Shamsi? So just check your email every once in a while during the summer. If Mr. Barwin gets back to me with anything of any import. Otherwise, we'll talk about it in September. I want to thank this board for being so pleasant to work with. It's been an exciting 7 months. I think we all deserve a little vacation time. So we'll see you in September. Anything else from anyone? Thank you. We are adjourned until